My name's Kunane Dreier. I'm the Director of Training and Program Development at the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, and our agency is located in Kaka'ako. And I'm here today with my colleague, Maddalynn. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Maddalynn Sesepasara. You can call me Maddie. And I run our transgender program, which is called Kua'ana Project. Thank you.
And I was remiss, and pronouns he, him, oya. And we like to do that to kind of just create a safe space for everyone when we think about pronouns, and we're going to talk about that later in the training or in this session. Okay, so before we dive into the content today, just a little bit about Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, also known as HHHRC or H3RC. You may have heard of us. We have this long mission statement, but our tagline is reducing harm, promoting health, creating wellness, and fighting stigma in Hawaii and the Pacific. And we say the Pacific because we've had the opportunity and the good fortune to do trainings and work within the 6 Pacific Island jurisdictions. And it's been wonderful to be able to have that opportunity. And a little bit more about our agency. I like to say our agency works with communities that sometimes a lot of people don't understand or don't know how to. I like to think of it in that sense versus people don't want to, right? And when I talk about this, these are our communities, our people who are living with and are affected by HIV, hepatitis, substance use, LGBTQ, our transgender community, sometimes our Native Hawaiian communities, sometimes it's an intersection of all these things, houselessness. And we really I just like to believe sometimes people just don't know how to work with some of our communities and our people. So I'm glad everyone's here today so that we can share a little bit more insight into our LGBT, our māhū communities, so that people have a better understanding of who we are and know our place. And we're not trying to recruit, we're not trying to do anything like that, but with just a little bit more understanding. Okay, so our agency is at the intersection of criminal justice, HIV and hepatitis prevention, mental health, substance use, and houselessness. And we say no wrong door. So we know that people will come to our agency for a specific service or one of our specific programs. We have about 27 different programs. And when someone comes into our agency, we're able to have conversations and assess and things like that, and then link them to other services, right? Or support. And then if it's something somebody may need that we don't offer or don't have the capacity or aren't doing, we connect them to another agency or service so that they can get that support as needed. Okay. So getting to know the room, I'm just curious, and you folks can either raise your hand, you can I'm curious, how many people here know someone who identifies as LGB&T or māhū? I see. Thank you. I see some hands. Yay. Right. How many of you in this room have provided services or support in your professional capacity to someone who identifies LGB and T? I see hands going up. Okay, so there's a couple hands that didn't go up, and I'm curious, and if you're open to it in the chat box, if you folks could share, how do you know you haven't come across somebody who's LGBT or māhū? Oh, okay, thanks, Jordan. And so thanks, Jordan, for that. So I do this. I ask this question because if it's me walking into the room or me coming to your agency or program or whatever it may be, or you're interacting with me, you can tell. There's no hiding it for me. You can tell. However, not everybody walks like me or talks like me or moves like me, things like expresses themselves like me. And so you never really know, right, someone's true identity if they are LGBT. And so I just like everybody to think about that not everybody true identity is put out there in the world to say, oh, he's from the LGBT community, or she's from the LGBT community, or she's transgender, or he's transgender, right? It's not always 100% you're going to be able to figure this out. Okay. I'm also curious in the room if you folks would put in the chat box your name, your preferred name, your pronouns, and where you work or what you do. That could, we're just kind of curious who's in the room with us. We have a small group, so it's good. It's easier. We won't pick on you or put you on the spot, but we definitely want to be. I'm curious who's in the room. Okay. So, what we're going to talk a little bit today during this hour is cultural diversity. And what does that really mean versus when we think about somebody who likes to say, I'm culturally competent, right? But Hawaii culture and history are placed as māhū, right? And the difference between someone who identifies as māhū versus somebody who identifies as LGBT, or these Western concepts of identity, right? LGBT is a Western concept. Māhū is a cultural place, a cultural term, cultural identity. Two very, very different things. Some tips around providing services, some of the barriers that you may experience or our community experiences when they come into access services, and we have solutions to those. We have a little time at the end for Q&A, but we have a small group. So feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question or have a comment. You can raise your virtual hand. We're very informal here. There's no necessary process that you have to do. Jenna will be monitoring the chat room and will be able to let us know if there's a question in the chat room, that kind of thing. Maddie and I always in these trainings say this is a very safe space. This is your opportunity to ask us as members of this community with a lifetime lived experience and then also work in this field to ask us any questions. And we're going to be happy to answer all the questions that come in during this time. But if you see it, if you see me in Long's Drugs in Hau'ula one day and you go to ask me a question, I might just kind of look at you like you're crazy because it might not be a safe space, right? Today is a safe space to ask us questions. So our objectives, right, increase understanding into our LGBT community, the historical context of māhū, understanding the cultural differences between Native Hawaiian identity or even Pacific Islander identities when we think of māhū, and Western values, and then some skills around providing services. Okay, again, this is my disclaimer. I'm not here to recruit for my community. I'm just we're here to share some insight into the community. So, these trainings for Maddie and myself, we love doing them because what it tells us is that the next time one of our community walks into any of your services or programs, agent, whatever it may be, you folks will be able to have a better understanding and support for them. Okay. So it's almost October. Pride, our LGBT Pride Festival is in October on Oahu. Most places celebrate in June. Oahu does it in October. It's huge. There's going to be a big parade again. I'm happy to report that our Pride Parade is the largest parade on the island of Oahu now. Surpassed Aloha Week, surpassed Kamehameha Day Parade, and this year it's even bigger. It's going to be even bigger. So come celebrate. Whether you're from the community or a friend of the community, come celebrate. So our pride flag is there, and our transgender flag is up on the screen at the moment. Okay. All right. So now that that's out of the way, we're gonna roll into the content of our training, and I'm just wanting to make sure I watch the time. All right, everybody. So again, questions, comments, anything like that, feel free to just unmute and let us and ask away. Okay, so culture, right? When we think about culture, right, it's a set of patterns, our thoughts, the way we communicate, the language we use, the our practices, our customs, our courtesies, all of these things create culture. And every group of people have a culture, right? So there's a culture at our office, there's a culture at the Leeward District School of Social Worker, and things like that. There is a culture at our office at HHHRC. There's a culture. And then there's a culture when I go home to my community, right? There's a culture within my own home and how I interact with who's living in my house and things like that, right? So every group of people will have a culture, right? Even within our office, right? There's an agency culture, but then there's a culture amongst our departments, and then there's a culture around the circle of friends I have at work, right? All of these things are culture, and we learn how to practice and just kind of socialize and interact within these kinds of, I don't want to say boundaries, but just these understandings and practices. And that's culture. So when we think about LGBT culture, there's a whole bunch of ideas that go into this. So culture, where's my little mouse? Right? The dynamics of culture, all of these things impact it, right? The customs, our rituals, our manners of interacting, right? How we speak with people, right? Um, our racial background and those practices that we um, are taught as we grow up, right? I live in Hau'ula. That's a whole different culture than the way people function and interact in the culture of living in Honolulu and that the busy chaos of the city, right? Two different cultures there and things like that. And a lot of times as individuals, some of these little pieces of our cultural identity will overlap, right? They overlap in the way how we function. So a lot of times people like to say, "Oh, I took that 1 hour training from Maddalynn Kunane on LGBT culture humility or cultural competency, so I know everything there is to know." But what we know, and even I know as a lifelong member of this LGBT community, I don't know everything. Like I don't know the culture of young adult LGBT, quite different than the way I've aged out of that group. So I'm not connected, right? So if I approach community and individuals with some cultural humility, right? The lifelong process of learning, self examination, and refinement of one's own awareness and knowledge. If I approach each person, each community, each group with some cultural humility, then I'm open to learning and understanding who this person is that's in front of me so that I can be better support to them, provide better service, just be able to get to know them better, right? 1 hour, I'm culturally competent, and yeah, we like to go in. Some of them say, "Oh yeah, yeah, I know this," right? And then start talking māhū, start talking, using the language, and all of a sudden we're like, "Oh no, you're out of your mind. Why are you here?" As an individual. But cultural humility, right? Going in and approaching a situation, a community, a person with an open mind to learn really who they are, what makes them who they are, and how these things impact how they receive services, um, ask for services, that kind of thing, right? We need to have that this humility in this arena. Right, and just really understanding that there's an intersectionality here. Like a friend of mine loves to say things are related to things, right? So my ethnicity, my gender, my age, my sexual orientation, all these things on this wheel can impact who I am as a person, as an individual. It also impacts who I am and that person as I present myself at that moment. And we'll talk a little bit about that piece in a little while. But just know things are related to things, the intersectionality, right? And how we function in the world as individuals. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Maddie, so that you don't have to listen to me for a whole hour.
Thank you, Kunane. So right now we're going to talk about Hawaiian culture. Here, family is a predominant factor and plays a huge role in Hawaiian and Pacific Island culture. So here, there's a picture of a group of LGBTQ that had a retreat in early 2000. You know, we all didn't really know each other, and we kind of stuck to our own clique. But by the end of this retreat, we had shared stories, we had learned about each other, and we realized we all shared similarities, and we all became a family. And to this day, a lot of us are still connected, and we kind of do this work that me and Kunani is doing too on different islands. So it's pretty amazing how family plays a role in everything that we do here in our island. So, yeah. When it comes to culture terminology, no, when it comes to iconic, it refers to cohabit male with male or female with female. Now, when it comes to noho iconic, this refers to what is that? It refers to them sitting with their people. In other words, our noho iconics, they had respected roles. You know, they were considered like, they did errands or they were part of our royalty family, especially our kings and queens, and making sure things got done. So they had really respected roles. When it came to moi iconic, this referred to an intimate relationship, and so what is that? And Moi Aikane also was a way of keeping the bloodline strong. And this is how they practice safe sex. When our kings found a female attractive and they were, a commoner or what are they called? What are they called in Hawaiian? I don't know. The
Maka'ainana.
yeah, huh?
Maka'ainana.
Or maka'ainana, exactly. And if a king found her attractive, because of the bloodline, they did not want to mix it. What they did was they wanted to see if they had a brother, and they slept with the brother because it was so important to keep the bloodline strong. So it's so interesting how our Hawaiians were so akamai, you know. And when it came to māhū, this really referred to our transgender folks, our non-binary folks, and these are people born with either both sex, and this was also a way of identifying homosexual of either sex. So I am considered māhū. Next slide, please. So here we have documentation that māhū does exist. And here in the early 1800s, we have Reverend Cochrane Forbes that states this: one man who has never dressed in male costume from his birth now labors under conviction. He appears truly humble, but says he does not know how to change his dress. I told him that if he would be a follower of Jesus, he must make no reserve, but must be willing to sacrifice everything. Poor fella, he has a hard conflict with his pride, but the sinner must be willing to do anything for Christ. So again, this is this is when the Westerns started coming in. This is when the missionaries came in, and they're telling us what we're doing is wrong. Our language, our hula, our practices, all of that. They're saying, oh, you can't be doing that. And this is where, the conflicts all start with Western and Hawaiian culture. Next slide. Did I do that right, Kanan? Māhū and Hawaii. Again, māhū is a cultural term. There is no documentation that Hawaiians ever used the word māhū in a negative way. There is nothing that stated that. Māhū was very part of society. We were valued, we were respected, we were caretakers, we were healers. We had very respected roles. And not anyone could be māhū. You had to understand being māhū, it came with a role and responsibilities. And so understanding that not anyone could just be māhū, it came with a lot of responsibilities and understanding our role on that as well. So once you understand that, then you understand how important māhū was with our people because of these important roles. Next slide.
And Maddie, if I could just add, right, when we talk about māhū, we're talking about an individual who privileged, right, the mana of both Kane and Wahine, and we could and very much could go back and forth with the role. And when Maddie talks about role and responsibility, there was a role for us in our family or in society, in our communities, to carry this knowledge. And a lot of times I believe we're born into these roles. And depending on what it is, that responsibility, that kuleana that came along with that, I don't want to say it was a heavy burden, but for most of us, we don't walk away. I'm Hawaiian, Chinese, white. I also identify as māhū because of my role in my family. And I've accepted this responsibility that kind of came with who I am, and fulfilled it, and now looking to what's next. So,
thank you. When it came, okay, so Ku and Hina, referring to our ancestral gods. Ku referring to the male, the man, the masculinity, the butchness, and Hina referring to the female, the wife. This is the softer side, the nurturing side. This is the female side. So all of us have Ku and Hina in us. But our māhū were looked as precious assets because they had the ability to embrace both male and female qualities, and they were considered a secret weapon because they could switch it on and off. When it was time to go to war, they would go to war. When it was time to come home and take care of family and be that person that played that role with being our caretaker, our healers, and all of that, we did that. So we were we're considered the secret weapon because we knew how to switch it on and off. But everyone possesses this Ku and Hina. Yeah? Mana Māhū, this was a movement that started in 2019, I believe. There was a movement that was happening up at Mauna Kea, and everyone was showing their respects. All these groups are going up there, showing their respects, showing their support for Mauna Kea. But there was a group that wasn't there, and our elders realized that our Māhū folks were missing, and they had reached out to Hina and told Hina, where is our Māhū community? Why are they not up here fighting with us and standing with us? We need them here. And so Hina, Kumuhina made that call, and she used to say, hey, we need you folks up here. Please gather our folks. And that's what we did. We called all these LGBT leaders from all different islands, and we went up there. We did our thing, and it was so amazing. This for us as Māhū folks, this was the calling that we needed. This was the moment that we needed, that we've been waiting for all this time, because we were ridiculed by the Western society or Western beliefs. It was used in such a negative way that we never felt we could be with our people again. But because of this movement, we were back again at the table with our people. We were back at the table, and that moment, I'm telling you, it was so beautiful, and it was just the feeling, the love, the mana that we felt. It was an empowering moment for us. And they had this mana Māhū. Was it no wait? let me take that back. The Kapu Aloha March. And at that march, the front line leading that march was all Mahu folks, all leaders. And that's because we knew where we belonged with our folks. We knew what our role was, guiding our folks, making sure they're in line and we're leading them where they're supposed to, because that was our role and responsibility, so it was beautiful, so now we know we're back with our people. Yeah. Māhū wahine, this word was coined because it was used in such a negative way. For me, I hated the word mahu. When growing up in Waianae, anyone that was considered mahu would either get beaten up or was bullied, and I hated it, But there was four we call them our four founding mothers, our trans mothers, that really embraced us and really taught us to what the word mahu means, the true meaning of it, and why it is so important. Even though they tried to encourage us to embrace the word mahu, it didn't work. But once they coined the word mahu wahine, it helped us, it helped us. And with them teaching us and guiding us and explaining us and drilling it to the head that mahu is a proud word. Don't feel discouraged. Don't feel ashamed of that word. And it worked. It worked for our community here. We embraced that word mahu wahine till this day. And it's not a real word. It's just a made up word. But this was a way of helping our community to embrace a word that we need to be proud of again. And we are. As long as you use it in a respectful way. If someone asks me, excuse me, are you mahu? I'm going to be, oh yeah, yes, I'm mahu. But if you come in a negative way and say, oh, you mahu, then we're going to have issues and we might be throwing down later. So as long as it's used in a respectful way, I will gladly, say, yes, I am mahu and thank you. Yeah. The Hawaiian way. This is what Kunane will try here. With everything that's going on right now on the continent, all the hate that's going on, all the anti-trans bill, the LGBT bills, trans youth, all these attacks that's going on the continent. We here in Hawaii know, especially Hawaiians, we know that is not pono. We know that is not the Hawaiian way, and because we have a place. We have a place in society. Mahu has a place. And although we're not experiencing the same as other places like Florida or Texas, we understand that we need to be alert, because a lot of these religious beliefs, these Western these Western cultures is really scaring our people, and so we need to make sure it doesn't come here. But I'm glad we live in Hawaii, because we totally understand, and this is the Pono way, the Hawaiian way, and everyone should lead by it. Oh, did I do that good, Kunane? Our local history. So here, in the early 60s and 70s, our trans elders, our kupuna folks, were forced to wear a button that said that they're a boy. And the reason why they were forced to wear this button is because military men were coming down to hotel streets, and they were picking up the trans girls. And when they would get busted, they would play dumb. They say, oh, I didn't know that was a guy. I didn't know that was a boy. But they knew exactly what they were and who they were. But because they got caught, they had to play dumb. And so what happened was, because this was going on, there was a judge that had told the police department, why don't you wear a button, make them wear a button that says they're boy. This wasn't even law. It was just something that was suggested by a judge, and the police officers took off with it. So the girls had to get really crafty, wearing, they had purses that, that would flip one way or flip the other way. So when the cops came, they would flip it the way that said they're a boy. And when the cops went away, they flipped it the other way where it didn't reveal it. But they were forced to wear this button. They were forced to stay on only certain streets. If they're caught on other streets, they would get their ass beaten. They would get thrown in the rivers on River Street, or they would get thrown in jail. The only place they found refuge, the only place they felt safe was at the Glades. There was a nightclub called the Glades. I've never experienced it. I wish I did. I've heard so much amazing stories, but this was the only place that our girls found refuge whenever the paddy wagons or the police was out there harassing them, they came into the glades and they found their place, their home, and I thank the glades for being there for our queens. But thank God for ACLU and our trans leaders back then. They were able to fight this stupid button and have it removed, because I cannot picture myself ever having to wear a button that says I'm a boy. That's just ridiculous. So, I pay a lot of respects to our kupuna trans leaders, because if not for them, I cannot imagine what it would be like for us. Next slide. So also other cultures, māhū in Pacific and other places around the world, understanding that everyone had their own culture before Western influences. Yeah.
Yes, and Maddie, you make a really all of these places that have these roles for our similar to Mahu, all haven't had the impact the way of Western society, right? Because Western culture, Western values, Western beliefs are what has been impacting our people negatively. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Ohana, biological and hanai. For me, I'm going to say, for me, when I came out, I was one of the few lucky ones. My biological family was very supportive, but that's not normally the case for our trans community. Normally, when they say they want to be a girl or want to be trans, a lot of my trans sisters were kicked out of their home, but because I was lucky, my family, my biological family accepted me. I was able to live the life that I wanted to. And, I could wear makeup, I could dress like a girl, I could go out and be comfortable in my own skin. But something was missing. I felt like, I was, there was other trans girls and I was like, how come they look like that? Or how, they look softer? I didn't understand that. And I found my Hanai, which was my drag family. Once I became part of a drag family, they were the ones that introduced me to gender affirming care, what it means to be on hormone therapy, where to get the shots, and gender affirming surgeries and all of that. I found that with my Hanai family, and so by having both of my families, I was able to live this beautiful, authentic life that I have today. But understanding that sometimes they don't collide. Like my real mother couldn't understand why I would prostitute, as to where my Hanai family, my drag family, they understood, because I couldn't get jobs, because no one was hiring me, because my name didn't match my appearance, and so no one wanted to hire me, because you're not this person. They're thinking a guy's going to walk through a door by a trans person. So understanding, I needed, my Hanai family was the one that really helped me get a backbone, and really told me, girl, if you want to eat tomorrow, you need to go suck some dick right now, because no one's hiring, no one's doing anything. So I got a lot of my tough skin, and I'm gonna tell you, doing that, I'm gonna tell you, I cried. I cried the first time. I cried every time. I hated doing what I had to do, but we had to. That's how it was for us. And so I thank my Hanai family for, teaching me tough skin and teaching me some stuff that I would never learn from my biological family, you know. But I really want Kunani. Kunani, can you share the other slide?
So I guess really as Maddie said, right, our biological family can provide us some support, may not even agree. And we see more and more of our young LGBT youth being put out of
Mm-hmm.
the home because the family doesn't agree. And then the Hanai family comes in and is able to provide that support and guidance. And we had a friend of mine, call me to let me know that his son back then in the 10th grade, shared that he wanted to be a girl and that was his true self, and da 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 da. And the father didn't know what to do. And so we were able to provide the father with some support and insight and guidance and understanding. and then in turn the father was able to better support the child, right, his child, and all he wanted from the child was to graduate from high school, and that has happened. She's a beautiful young woman. She's actually graduated from college, but it was bumpy for him and his family because his mom, his side of the family, strong Catholic family, they had a really hard time with this whole transition. But so how do you, when we think about support, who is it that's going to show up at the door? Is it going to be Maddie, who might have these children and providing that support as a Hanai family and that mother figure? Or is it going to be a biological parent? Right. So things like that, we always have to think about who is your support system, that kind of thing. So I'll just finish up, Maddie. Yeah, so in our LGBT community, māhū community, there's lots of social structures, right? So our community will separate or divide ourselves up or connect with each other based on, it could be age, it could be ethnicity, youth, where we find each other, right, where we live, right, our identity within this LGBT or gay or lesbian communities, right? This list of houses here are the houses that we have, as Maddie talked about the families. Maddie's actually the Ashton house. She is the matriarch of this house, this family. She has 16 kids, is it, Maddie? And then they have kids, and this house, this Ashton household, provides that same family unit structure that you would get at, hopefully you get when you within your own biological family, right? And that support and the guidance that Maddie would provide to the younger people coming into this family who had nowhere else to go. Maddie was able to provide that. So those are some of the houses there. And to get a really a good understanding of this house system, if you watch the series Pose, that you can get a really insight. These house systems come out from the ball system back in the 80s in New York City and on the east, other big cities where we saw a large number of our community being ostracized from their families because of either their gender identity, sexual identity, and even HIV status, right? They were put out of their families and they found each other and support as they needed. So any questions about māhū or our place, our rightful place in society before we move into Western culture? And this one will be pretty quickly, and then we're going to do some services. And if there's silence, that just means you think Maddie and myself are fabulous. No. Okay. Western culture, right? LGBTQIA+. I'm old school. When I was growing up, it was LGB&T. Now it's LGBTIAQ plus all of these. When I speak and you hear me say LGBT, it's inclusive of all. It's just that my life has been LGBT, so that's what I continue to say. But just know, it's inclusive of all these identities, and that's the biggest switch from. When we look at these identities, these terminology, or usually when we have in larger amount of time, we do these bigger. But when we think about all of these identities, right? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer, questioning, two-spirit, and so two-spirit and māhū are cultural identities with roles within the society, right? In that community. The rest are Western identities, right? Gay, lesbian, right? And that's more around just your sexual orientation or your identity. And two very different things, right? Māhū and two-spirit, they have specific roles in the community, in their families, things like that. So the easiest, most simple way to think of some of these is this genderbread person, and they use this in schools and with young people. But when we think about gender identity, right, how we see ourselves, how we identify, male, female, somewhere in between, right? Sexual orientation is really about attraction, who I love, who I'm attracted to, who I want to spend time with, right? Sex or biological sex is your genitalia, how you're born, what you're born with, and what you may currently have, right? That can switch. But birth at sex would be The doctor saying you have a boy, you have a girl, or maybe you're intersex, right? You both. And then gender expression is how we put ourselves out there to the world, right? How we show ourselves, how we let people know who we are, right? As I said in the beginning, I walk different, I talk different, I move different. My expressions are much different, right? So expression, how we put ourselves out there, it could be masculine, feminine, somewhere in between. So all of these things, right? Gender identity, sexual orientation, right? My own sense of self, male or female, somewhere in between, and then my sexual orientation, who do I love? Who am I emotionally attracted to, right? That's sexual orientation. These two things, my brain and my heart, they're not connected. And neither is our gender identity and sexual orientation. They're not one doesn't impact the other for every single person in the same way. And that's really important to understand. Right? And then gender expression, how we put ourselves out there, feminine, masculine, somewhere in the middle, right, on this continuum, can change by the setting, right? You catch me 11 a.m. on this webinar doing this training, you can tell, but it's not as, elaborate or as expressive as if you were at my house on a Friday night at 11 p.m. Quite different, right? When I'm surrounded by my friends, I'm able to be a little bit more out there, or my true self. So gender expression changes with setting, right? Do I need to be a little more professional? Can I be a little more laid back, right? Changes with setting. And that's for everyone. That's for everyone. And now that we're talking, so gender non-binary, right, is it's an umbrella term, someone who may be gender non-conforming, they don't want to pick male or female, someone who's on the binary, right, doesn't go to either end, but it's going to be somewhere in the middle. But it's someone who doesn't want to follow the stereotype or the expectation of being male or female, right, masculine and feminine. So when we think about these gender identities as a big picture, right? Transgender is this larger umbrella. The binary, people who are transgender but are living on their identity is as a trans man or a trans woman, right? They're picking a very specific identity in that sense, and their journey takes them to a goal that they have with this identity of male or female, right? Non-binary, when we think of androgynous or gender fluid, gender non-conforming, gender queer is under the non-binary umbrella. And these are individuals that, again, are not trying to be male or female, not trying to get to either end of the binary, right? They go back and forth, right? My age group, my time period, I'm going to say boy George. That's the identity. That's someone who meets this criteria for me, or my understanding of being non-binary, right? Very back and forth, across the binary moved. Will Smith's child is considers themselves non-binary. Individuals like this that don't want to pick male or female, and are not transgender male female either. So when we think about all these terms, right, sex assigned at birth, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, if I gave everybody this little table and asked you folks to be very honest about where you folks were, I'm going to do this little example for you, the interrelatedness of terms. I would bet that everybody's table would look different, right? If we put the X on these binary or across these graphs where we fell in, right? So sex at birth, and this is my X's, these are my X's, I was born male. Gender identity, male, but not fully male. There's a little bit of girl, right? Because I identify as māhū, so I'm kind of like in this middle. Gender expression, even more so across more towards the female sides, right? Male, female, androgynous is the A in the middle. Now, if you came to my house at 11 p.m., I'm going to tell you my ex would be a lot more over towards the female side, the F side. I get a little more loud, a little more flamboyant, a little more, expressive. So again, that can change, right? And then my sexual orientation, I am attracted to men, right? Male, female, or bisexual is in the middle. And again, this can change, right? People's attraction of who they are emotionally attracted to or may love can change. Can change. We see it happen. So, if we were to ask each of you to do this little exercise and you folks answered honestly, I would say that every single person's paper would be different. And that's the beautiful thing about this world is that everybody's papers would be different, right? That we are individuals and we put ourselves out there and live our lives the way we as as a person are most comfortable, most authentic, most real. And then if we think of somebody who may be on the spectrum, right, non-binary, queer, non-conforming, not defined, they're not going to put X's anywhere. They're not, right? And that's the goal, and that's the another beautiful thing, right? No X's anywhere. So when we think about relationships, right, the person in the middle could be in a relationship, right? Male, female, male to female transgender, or female to male transgender. And we could be in relationships with any of these identities, right? These individuals. But the way we define a relationship is really up to the couple or those partners themselves, right? So it used to be when I grew up, if there was a guy in a relationship with a transgender woman or a māhū, they were automatically put into this box of being gay, right? But that's not the truth, because if it's a guy, if it's a male who identifies as heterosexual and they're with a transgender woman who identifies as a woman, they might define their relationship as heterosexual, right? So it's not up to us to put the labels on to any of our people or their relationships. I see something in the chat. Is that me? Oh, okay. Thank you. Um, Pronouns, right? He, him, she, her, they, them. There's some other on here, z and hair, and those are pronouns that are being more used more frequently on the continent. I have never heard them being used in Hawaii, but just so you're aware. But what is someone's pronoun? How do we make sure we're using the correct pronoun, right? So here's the deal: if you don't know, just ask, right? And the easiest way to do that is, my name's Kunane. I use he, him pronouns. What's your name? What pronouns do you use? And if you happen to misgender or use the wrong pronoun, you just apologize. And then going forward, you use the correct pronoun. And then here's the most beautiful thing, right? Again, right? Olelo Hawaii, our Hawaiian language, there is no gender attached to the pronouns that we use in our Hawaiian language, oya, enya, kona, and kana. There's no gender attached to these pronouns. It's just used, you know who you're talking about, if it's male or female, māhū, it doesn't matter. We use the same pronoun. We were another example of how Hawaii was ahead of the game and living in this beautiful place. And then Western society comes in and jams us up, right? When you got to use these specific pronouns, da 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 da. So another beautiful example of how we were living in harmony way before these Western influences. Again, pronouns, who should use them? We should all use them. It shouldn't just be for someone who's transgender to tell you which pronouns to use, right? We want to create a respectful space of acceptance and being inclusive, right? And it really as a service provider, it builds the relationship when you're using the correct pronouns with someone and the appropriate name, right? Again, how do you know? How do you do it? You can introduce yourself using pronouns. We have them on our badges and our email signatures, things like that. And again, if you make a mistake, it's okay. Our people are very forgiving when they know you made a mistake and you put an earnest effort into not doing that again. Yeah. And then using more of these gender neutral type pronouns or just words, right? Hi, friends. Good morning, folks. Things like that. And avoiding, when I go through, I have a high voice. I go through the drive-through and I'm always, okay, ma'am, your total is that, and then I pull up and they're trying to backtrack, right? And it's like, girl, I got it. I have a high voice. It's okay. But when people see me in person and then think, oh, this guy got a high voice and then become disrespectful, that's when we get, it's not a good thing. And then using people first language, right? We're like really acknowledging the person who's in front of you, right? Person who uses substances, someone who may be experiencing houselessness or is unsheltered, right? Someone who's living with HIV or living with hepatitis C, someone who is LGBT, right? Someone who engages in sex work, right? It's about the person. It's not, just because I'm gay, that doesn't change everything, right? That kind of thing. So again, Western terminology really just kind of is a label that we put on people when we think about identity and things like that, versus māhū, which is a culture. We had a place in our culture, in our society, right? Two very different identities and two different meanings. So knowing that when someone walks into your place, you're able to better provide services. Okay, and we got 7 minutes, so I'm going to blow through these next few slides, and we're going to put the slides up on the app so you'll be able to access them. But just know for our own community, there's a lot of things that will create barriers, right? Stigma and shame. We don't want to come in because of just who we are. We have our own internal stigma and then external stigma coming from. So I might not want to go in for services, right? Not at my dining room table. It's been my experience where it's okay for someone to have the friend who might be LGBT or have the friend that's māhū, but don't let it be my own child, right? It becomes a whole different set of circumstances when it's their own child. It's almost like a double standard, right? Culture, lack of knowledge, like I don't even know where to get some of these services. I don't know, I'm putting myself at risk for something, right? We just don't know. Substance use, intimate partner violence, suicide, much higher within our LGBT communities than among our heterosexual counterparts. And then just lack of family support, right? And so I'm all alone, right? So coming in to see you folks, I'm afraid to go in and see somebody because I'm going to be judged because I'm māhū, or I'm going to be judged because I'm this young gay boy, right? Nobody's going to understand why I had to engage in sex work, right? When I say I went home with this guy last night because I wanted somewhere safe to sleep, right? And things like that, right? Or if you weren't out all night, you wouldn't have gotten beaten up. If you weren't dressed up like this, you wouldn't have, right? Like I deserved what I got. Not being addressed as I present. I keep coming in and I go by Gloria and everybody's still calling me George. Not the T, right? So not being as we addressed, or the pronouns or our name. The myth that every young gay boy is looking for a sugar daddy, or that every transgender girl is going to be either a showgirl or a prostitute or a sex worker, right? That's not the case, right? At all, right? So the myths of our community. Uninsured, limited access, guilt by association. If I go into Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, people are going to think I'm there for an HIV test, or maybe that I have HIV, right? Guilt by association. And then staffing in programs not having enough training on LGBT communities. So amen for you folks being here. So here's some tips to provide service, and then we have a few minutes for questions, right? Provide a safe space. Use the correct pronouns and name that they choose, right? Standardize all the questions. Ask everybody the same questions. If you only ask somebody questions in your intake form or screening process because you have this assumption of who they are, then we miss a whole opportunity, right? Ask everybody every questions, no matter what we think, right? I ask about sexual history and partners. I ask, how many partners have you had in 6 months? How many are male, female, or transgender? And it doesn't matter who's sitting in front of me. I ask them all the same questions, and I tell them that takes the stigma out of it, like they're being judged, right? Focus on their needs and not their identity. Like, do you need to know, or are you asking questions because you're just maha'oi, right? Don't do it. Respect confidentiality. If you can go to partner appointments, that's wonderful. Listen, manage your discomfort. When I tell you about, I did this or this, manage your discomfort. Be client-centered and check your privilege, because what you may think is something easy to do in life may not be for the person who's sitting in front of you. Asking correct questions, especially around identity, if you're collecting this information, but if you want to know if you're looking to capture transgender information around someone's identity, sex at birth, male or female, and then their current gender, and if you had 4 of these, you can capture gender identity. You can capture if someone's transgender, right? And then making the questions not so stigmatizing, right? So in sexual health, my go-to question is, tell me what you enjoy when you're with your partners, right? Then it's not so like, like stigmatizing, right? And then again, do you really need to know when we're asking questions, or are you just being nosy? If you have policies in place around preferred name and pronouns, things like that, then it's across the board. So I go in and I see Jenna. Jenna calls me by the right name, the chosen name, and then I get to see Steven, and Steven's going to use the same name and pronouns, and so on and so forth. Who else? Oh, I just missed. But yeah, so everybody within your program, agency, whatever it may be, is going to call me by Georgia or Georgina versus George, right? And if your systems don't have a way to capture that, your electronic medical records or whatever data systems you're using, put it on the piece of paper so that we all using it. We have a bunch of resources. Kua'ana, again, if you come across anyone who is transgender, you can send them to Maddie's Way. Here's a list of resources. It'll be in the slides that we're going to provide for you folks. And then here's my last little plug. Are you an ally? Right? You don't necessarily have to be from my community, from our community to be supportive and understanding, but are you an ally? Are you going to stick up for me when I'm not in the room? Okay. Let me stop this share. I'm going to open it up. See if anybody has any questions. 1 hour is really not enough time to do all of this, but definitely, if any who's left wants to ask any questions, we're happy to help out.
Mohala asked in the chat, where may we obtain training or helpful resources?
So Mohala, great question. So we have some resources listed here that we're going to post this out. Mohala, I'm actually here in Kona with Malia and someone else from Waianae Coast Comprehensive at this other meeting. So they know we're easy to find. Please, www.hhhrc.org/Kua'ana. You can reach out to that. If you go to the website, you can put in a request and we can connect you with people also through that resource, through our own resource. Maddie and her team, great resource. Okay. Any other questions while we have you folks? Oh, I see. So Mohala, your youth, if you can connect them with Maddie, they have some amazing programs that might be able to help. We also have some mental health providers, right, that might be able to talk a little bit with them. So, yes.
Is there anything similar to that project on Outer Islands?
Great question. So Jenna, yes. So each island has an agency, right? Maui AIDS Foundation, Kumukahi, Maui AIDS Foundation on Maui, Kumukahi on Hawaii Island, both Kona and Hilo, and then on Kauai is Malama Pono Health Services. They have similar to Kua'ana project, whereas on their staff that can provide these services, and even then get linked to gender affirming care.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your culture, your community, your stories with us. We so appreciate it, and it gives us a lens into your experience as māhū and kind of how we can help and be a part of your community, even as allies or as members of that community.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks for having us. Okay. Aloha.
All right.